Let's talk, however, about how the media is framing it, because this is a hit job of the highest order that's going on right now between the creators of Sound of Freedom and articles from the likes of Jezebel and The Guardian. And the reason I ended up wanting to cover it is because there ended up gaining a lot of traction on Twitter of people calling them out for how biased their takes on this stuff were. Yeah. And if you read these articles, guys, I do encourage everyone to go read the Jezebel article in particular, because they have a real problem with this movie.
They said Sound of Freedom is an anti-child trafficking fantasy fit for QAnon. Star Jim Caviezel has been talking about adrenochrome and organ harvesting on his press tour.
Which has nothing to do with the movie.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with the content of the movie, which has nothing to do with QAnon conspiracy theories, organ harvesting, adrenochrome, etc. But if we're able to do mainstream studio movies the courtesy of disregarding what is said in the press tours by all these stars,
which is what we're doing for Barbie,
which is exactly what we're doing for Barbie, then it's only fair that they do the same thing when it comes from a smaller studio with a smaller budget.
We're literally like, I'm like, oh, Kate McKinnon, that does sound stupid, but I'm going to ignore it. I'll let it slide.
We do that all the time, and we always give stuff a chance. Like, I'm not going into any movies deciding how I'm going to feel about it.
Exactly. So oddly enough, what's funny is I actually think they do themselves the most disservice when they do these press tours, because they always think it always sounds to me like actors who wish they did something that they felt was more important with their lives, so they try to elevate the meaning of their profession to a higher level than what it actually needs to be. And that's one thing if you're in the theater or you're making like art house films that you believe have this really big important message. But when it's a big budget Hollywood movie, you're making corporate art. Like don't raise it to the level of poetry. That's fine. And that's like, it's fine. It's okay.
It's okay to just want to entertain people and make them have fun. Or
they don't like that. They want to both entertain you and talk down to you.
Jim Caviezel as Timothy Ballard tearfully recites, "Over 2 million children a year are being sucked into the deepest recesses of hell. At last, QAnon's camp appeal gets the cinematic exploration it demands."
And they don't.
As if child trafficking is some QAnon conspiracy theory and it doesn't happen in the real world.
They also turned it into a political issue. Like, the harming of children should not be a left or right issue in any way, shape, or form. This should be, like, it actually is kind of one of the most black-pilling things ever. Like, if we can't even come together on the abuse of children, what the hell can we come together on? Like, if we can't all decide collectively hurting kids is bad, I don't know how much hope there is.
But I think it has to do with the tribalism, because I don't think that if it were this specific person that was attached to it and the specific actor as well, that they would care as much. But it's basically, they're like, oh, right-wing people maybe even, and like Christian people are attached to this, therefore I have to attack it.
Even though it was already filmed completely under the supervision of Fox,
yes,
right?
It was a 20th Century Fox film, so it wasn't this to begin with. To be fair, like, look, the producers of this movie did not want Jim Caviezel. Tim Ballard insisted that he play the role, and he looks, if you look at the pictures of him, he actually has a fair, once they get the hair dyed, he has a fair amount of resemblance to him. But, you know, the producers who their goal is, if you fall in the camp that they're there to make money, they're looking at Jim Caviezel and seeing him as box office poison,
right? Because
they're taking the Hollywood line that they think that the rest of America doesn't like this guy, when it's really just Hollywood that doesn't like this guy because of the Passion of the Christ. Because
I'm pretty sure that movie did pretty well, though, if I remember things.
Are you gonna watch the sequel when it comes out? They're making a sequel.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
Passion of the Christ 2 Electric Boogaloo.
I don't know how to feel about that. I don't think we need a sequel.
Yeah, you know, because it's okay. So they told him, they said, look, we don't want Jim Caviezel for this role, and these articles are why. Because this is the type of press that happens. It's actually working in the studio's favor now, because it's allowing them to get all this great press. It outshone Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. I mean, everything. A turd outshines the Dial of Destiny. No offense. No, actually, never mind. Offense. I don't really care about Disney these days. But, like, they're so mad about it. And if you want to talk about media framing and just how bad it is, they do exactly what you expect all of these articles to do, which is lie by structure, which is by the last paragraph, the guy basically admits that it wasn't a bad movie.
He said it was well acted. It looked expensive.
And he says, I'm going to read you a quote that he says, this was the one that set me off. And he says... He's talking about the end of the movie, so this isn't. Maybe I should avoid this one.
Do you want us to avoid spoilers, or are you like set you're not going to watch?
I'm definitely not going to watch it. 100%.
Guys, skip. Pause for about 15 seconds while I give this quote. If you're going to see this movie, he says Ballard. He goes to rescue the child at the end of the movie from the jungle. It says Ballard throws the kid he rescues into a van that speeds away, and the only thing that visually distinguishes this from a kidnapping is the implied virtue. The
implied virtue of saving a child from her abuser.
He literally saves a child from a person who is abusing a child and brings the kid back to her father, and that is implied virtue. That is the most disgusting.
Like you're trafficking a child back to her father?
Yeah.
This is like taking your kid to soccer practice trafficking.
Yes. The Christian, they talk about the Christian undercurrent of the film. Look, the only line in this movie that could even be remotely considered a Christian undercurrent is the line, God's children are not for sale, which as far as I'm concerned is expertly delivered and perfectly in line with something that somebody of Tim Ballard's background and life would say.
Like, are we just supposed to brush over the fact that Timothy Ballard is a Christian in real life?
Like, what it is it's weird because this might actually be, if they were more fair to it, they would actually be able to make sure that the faith-based films that they hate so much might actually get better. Because as far as I'm concerned, this movie is the gold standard for being faith-based but not preachy to people that are not religious. I'm agnostic. I'm not of any religious denomination. I got under no circumstances any amount of inkling other than the fact that I knew the studio had faith-based projects, that it was anything of the sort.
Also, his accomplices in doing this sting operation in the movie were not religious people, and they were also extremely nuanced and morally complicated characters.
Yep. They say
it's not ham-fisted at all.
The film could be seen as adjacent to the alt-right paranoia that was originally stoked by 4chan and QAnon. Look,
they said also, how distant can Ballard, and by extension his organization, be from QAnon when the guy who's playing him, with whom he's been promoting Sound of Freedom, has been using the press opportunity to peddle QAnon theories about adrenochrome and organ harvesting?
We got a $20 super chat there from Angrospaz Marine.
Oh, he said, Passion of the Christ 2, The Easter Rising.
That's what it is. Look, like there's nothing you can do to people with this much political poison in their brain.
And that's what's ironic. These are people who love ham-fisted political messaging, but you even have one line they don't like. They will use it to brand your movie some alt-right. Exactly.
They also express distaste for Jim Caviezel's message at the end of the film, where he promotes this pay it forward program where you can pay for someone else's ticket to watch the movie. And they call it shameless begging, underlining a desperation to disseminate. A desperation to disseminate information about a real world problem.
And asking people to be kind and generous to other people. Remember, like we said, nobody is meaner to you than the person who has be kind in their social media profile. These are those people. And it also, the same thing was said in the Guardian article. And what I found the most hilarious about that is I had to literally click away a pop-up message that says, please donate to keep the Guardian going, as they're complaining about them choosing to do that in this movie. They also use the pay it forward method as their their excuse as to why it beat Dial of Destiny. The mega ultra super cope that came from this article from We Got This Cover. They say Sound of Freedom overtook Indiana Jones on the 4th of July based on a technicality.
Because all of the people who were going to watch Dial of Destiny were having barbecues with their families.
These people are evil, dude.
It's cope.
These people
They've
are
also
evil.
already made their money back because they had a small budget.
I mean, and not necessarily because the theater keeps 50%, so they probably still have to make a little bit more.
It's been out for a few days now, right?
So I don't know if it's made $30 million.
But maybe that's why you don't have like a 20-minute intro scene that requires the de-aging process, because that's going to burn through your budget.
What's funny about that is I was watching that, I'm just like, it actually does, as realistic as it looks, it still does a disservice because he was such a handsome, like Harrison Ford had such sharp features. Like I rewatched Temple of Doom and he's got dark, hollow, sharp features that they can't really replicate with that technology. It looks gaudy and like painted on.
I thought it looked it was uncanny valley. It was almost
Yes.
like his skin was shimmering or moving.
Yeah.
And the voice.
The voice did not seem like a young man's or even a middle-aged man's voice.
Which is weird because that's the technology they have the most ability to like.
I think they just didn't bother touching the audio.
My new favorite genre is listening to AI versions of artists cover other artists. I played Mary, this version where Britney Spears sings "It's Gonna Be Me" by NSYNC, and it sounds exactly like her. It's crazy. They could have done that. They could have done this with young Harrison Ford voice, no problem. But look,
The Guardian article said, for a fleeting moment this past 4th of July, while the intended audience of Indy's latest outing was presumably spending time with their families and friends at barbecues or in other social situations, an unoccupied fandom rallied by the star Jim Caviezel and claimed the day with 14.2 million gross.
I love Jim Caviezel all the more for this. Now, Person of Interest is my favorite television show of all time. I will rewatch it. I will start rewatching it again for the umpteenth time this weekend if it means that it pisses off somebody at Jezebel. Also, if you read the comments on the Jezebel article, I think the actual motives of the people who read it come to light. I don't think it's because people are like, oh, they're all secretly pedophiles. No, I think they just hate religion.
One person said, if these turds are concerned about trafficked and sexually abused kids, go visit any Christian fundamentalist compound or any Catholic church. Those places are ground zero for that shit. I don't know why you have to bring up every case of child abuse instead of like making a movie that focuses on one instance of it. Like,
it's crazy, dude. And it's
just because they hate you. Like, it's not about being pro or anti anything aside from anti-right wing, anti-Christian. And if those are the people who are supporting this movie, then they feel like they have to hate it, even if it doesn't make sense.
They have this image of their head of like actual 4chan basement dwellers coming out in droves to watch Sound of Freedom.
Yep. It's insane. And it's sad too, because in a lot of ways, like, look, if this was a movie about trafficking of upper class white women from Los Angeles, they'd be all for it, right?
That also happens, but that's not what this movie is about.
Exactly. The thing that we kept coming back to is like, look, you can make that movie. Why is this movie suddenly so controversial? And why do they have to pretend? Look, there are actual statistics out there that say, like, look, 1 to 2 million kids a year are sold into slavery. Now, one of the things that I thought was interesting is they point out, they're like, well, most of that is like, it's like work slavery. I'm like, is that better? What? Like, I was like, so they make your phones like against their will, so that's okay? What the hell are you trying to say with that?
It's okay. It's only child labor slavery. Like, this is like not a big deal. Like, why are you freaking out about it?
These
people,
the journalist said, this is tailored to go down easy. That's how propaganda works. Not all propaganda is evil.
Also,
propaganda is a neutral term. And if you're spreading propaganda to raise awareness to a well-founded cultural problem, I don't see how that's wrong.
This is my movie that I made to raise awareness about how horrible and surprisingly frequent child sex trafficking is. Oh, you're just a propagandist. Like, what?
Also, it doesn't go down easy. It goes down the opposite of easy.
Yeah.
This is a very tough. This movie will be a very tough one for a lot of people.
If you found it easy to watch, I'm worried about your moral conscience.
Well, I mean,
right? And also, it doesn't tie up everything in a pretty bow. There are questions that you're left unanswered to wrestle with after you watch it. Like, in the movie, it says that Tim Ballard saved 120 victims of child trafficking. And you know that there are millions more. Right. And that's made explicit in the movie. And you're left like wrestling with the question of like, what about those other kids? And even by the end of the movie, he doesn't find and convict the abuser of the girl that he saved.
Also hilarious how they frame it as a fantasy, as, oh, this is a alt-right conspiracy fantasy of the deepest, darkest recesses of the internet. The movie literally features actual footage of the real busts that happen, which is, it's literally fake. What they're saying is just simply not true, but they're framing it as such, and it's just so intellectually dishonest that it's kind of hard. Like, even if we were to talk about, because they call into question, like, his Tim Ballard's company has been under investigation for this and that. I'm like, fine, make that an article that's separate about that. If you want to go deep dive into whether Operation Underground Railroad has misused funds or has exaggerated the breadth of their work, fine. What does that have to do with the movie?
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the movie. It's just there to make people who love Jezebel feel better about reading an article with 40 cats around them.
It ends saying, the polish only makes Sound of Freedom's attempt to illustrate how a voguish cultural anxiety can be ameliorated if people would just be courageous enough to pursue it or give money to those willing to pursue it. More insidious.
How is that more insidious?
They're saying it's a voguish cultural anxiety that children are being trafficked for labor or sex abuse or what have you, as if this is some kind of unfounded satanic moral panic that like talking about Marilyn Manson in the 90s.
As if it's the same thing, yeah. Also, what else would you expect from people who have cats and not kids and don't actually understand, probably are on extensive amounts of antidepressants and have a hard time connecting with people? I'm just,
but they'll like
it's a shot in the dark, but I'm just saying it's
their
possible.
criticisms for the movie saying like, we're the people who actually care about the kids. The right doesn't care about the kids. They're just propagandists. But what are you actually doing to help them?
Like you're not, and not only you're not actively doing things to help them yourself, but you seem hell-bent on stopping other people, or at least criticizing the people who are helping them.
It's a bunch of cope, and it's really disgusting. And it was good to see
backseat drivers who can never do shit in their lives.
It was good to see a bunch of people pushing back on Twitter. Like Joel Berry says, he pulls up the headline that says "Sound of Freedom: The QAnon adjacent thriller seducing America." And he says, "It's official. Stopping child sex trafficking is QAnon now." That's apparently how far we've fallen in society.
Then
sign me up. I don't care.
Call me a Q-tard.
There you go. There you go. Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.